Now, Ashvin Parekh, partner and national leader of global financial services at Ernst&Young, is joining me on the phone line. Mr. Parekh, very good afternoon. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks for coming in on a day when we finally, can talk about this bill going through. So I want to talk on, a couple of specific points. And before I get to the banking license issue, I want to ask you about the impact of this voting right increase in private banks 26. Who stands to benefit from it, sir? Is it the existing promoter group? Is it potential new investors?
Well, actually, it's both. You see, in case of the new promoters, that is in case of, the existing banks, let's start with that. In case of all the new private sector banks, which were set up in 1992, and then a couple of them came up in 2000, 2001, in all those cases, once again, now the clarity exists, suggesting very clearly that the voting rights that they possess, the promoters possess, will be in keeping with their shareholding with a cap of 26%. So now that is one part of the reform. I thought it was more it has more implications for the new licenses, where what will happen is that in the first 3 or 4 years, till the new promoters dilute their equity to less than 26%, they'll have at least, through this provisions, it is made sure that the promoters can run the bank. A special resolution can be passed only with the promoter group participating in that particular resolution. So, this is one of the important reforms, Ira, I thought.
Okay, but so for public sector banks, then it doesn't really make that much of a difference, right? It's probably a name more than anything else, that increase in the voting right cap.
Well, there are two parts to it. There is voting rights per se, voting rights issue, and then there is also, to some extent, to a large extent, an issue of governance associated with that. So now what this will really imply is that if there is any shareholder group, which has a larger stake, and up to now, there was a restriction there was a cap up to 10% on their voting rights. There will be a participation. So at least to that extent, I should say this would certainly increase some amount of transparency in the public sector banking, some amount of a higher order of governance. So some of the decisions which, for example, a merger of a private sector bank with a public sector bank, for example, a public sector bank absorbing a private sector. We saw that in case of GTB, Oriental Bank of Commerce earlier. Did the Oriental Bank shareholders have any say in this regard in the past? They did not. Now there may be, on account of there are groups who have up to 5% shareholding. They can work together and see whether the issues are properly debated at the shareholders meeting. So it has some meaning to it, not that it is completely academical. And I suppose it has a good meaning in the governance area, Ira.
Got that, sir. Which brings me now to the big story, the strengthening of the central bank's hand, powers, supervisory powers. I guess now the RBI literally has no excuse but to go ahead with those final guidelines and eventually giving out new licenses, sir.
No, absolutely. Basically, there are two aspects to it. I think we shouldn't really look at the short-term, medium-term aspect, which is the whole debate about the new licenses. I suppose these reforms will be going a long way. They're really equipping the regulator with much more power, to make sure that three things happen. One is a good order of governance, including the board membership and the board representation at the banking companies. The second more important part is the functioning of the banks also, and also the allied groups associated with the promoter groups, let's say. So therefore, the regulator can now open up the veil, step into any kind of transaction that may have happened between the group companies of the promoter and the banking company. Now, all this is very relevant both in the context of what's the banking system today, but more importantly, if business houses are admitted into banking arena, then to that extent it becomes even more relevant. So that's the second. And the third one is that the licenses may be granted with a very specific set of business plan conditions. The new banks have to go to the financial outsiders. They have to do inclusion work. Now, all this, the regulator will be able to supervise, Ira, by virtue of the new powers.
Process, Mr. Parekh, that could unveil from here on that account. I think the general understanding is that the final guidelines will be put out. Then the applications would be invited. An external committee would come in at some point to look at these applications as well. So it's still a fairly long drawn out, like a 12-month kind of process, would you say?
Yes. See, now that the regulator has the power, I don't think it's become, it is very relevant now to pressurize the regulator to really come out with the licenses faster. A few months here or there, does not really matter. What is important, however, is that the new set of issues will now come to the fore. We may find, compared to 1992, we may find many more number of applications. So the regulator will have to really address those applications, really when they come out with some kind of a process where they select some of them, there is going to be a lot of issues around those who may not get accepted, into the system. Now, we don't want to get into an arrangement or an environment where, people start questioning, people start going back. So I do find that the regulator will really find it, very useful to put a watertight arrangement, a watertight process, a process under which, there is a complete transparency and fairness, and grounds on which the applications are treated, are examined, and they are accepted or rejected. It will really become important for the regulator to put out that. So let them take time is the simple observation I'm making, but let the regulator come out with something which is very clear, and actually it not just does it seem, but it should be a very transparent process.
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Parekh. That point is well taken. Thank you very much, sir. I know we've been bothering you time and time again, but thanks for the final word on this one. Appreciate it. That's all the time we have on Fundamentals. Thanks for watching.